Good afternoon and welcome. I am the head, well, recent head. I've been a head of precisely 7 weeks so far, so I'm learning as much as everybody else of a wonderful girls' boarding school based in Ashford in Berkshire. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what boarding is, because although there may be some in this audience who know, there may be quite a few who don't or aren't quite sure. Boarding is about living at school. It's about being in school, sleeping in school, having your lessons in school. So what are the benefits of that? Well, it means that it offers a holistic education. It means you don't just get to know your teachers in the classroom. As at Heathfield, after 4 o'clock, you have activities, you have lessons, you can see them afterwards, and then at the weekends you have activities, and you have a huge range of opportunities not necessarily open to you in terms of facilities, in sports, swimming. You make amazing friendships, and the relationships really are a part of the main strength of what boarding is about, whether it's with staff or whether it's with girls. This inculcates independence. I'll never forget my first year at Oxford when I had a girl next door to me who'd never been away from home before. And she found university much more difficult because she wasn't able to throw herself in to the same extent because she was missing home so badly. Boarding and being at a school that encouraged even day boarding, which is becoming more of a catchword now. Day boarding essentially means that you're in school for breakfast all day through to supper if you wish, or at Heathfield, and I can only really talk about Heathfield, is you stay until sort of 9 o'clock or 9:30 at night. And that creates the development of friendships and opportunities perhaps that you wouldn't have at a school that stops at 3:30. I think when talking about boarding and whether boarding is right for your child, I think it's important also to consider the needs of your family. Are you a family who is spectacularly well organised in organising different activities after school? As a day pupil, are you good at commuting from one place to another? I don't know about you, but having lived and commuted from London to Ashford for 3 years, I'm well aware that it takes 45 minutes just to get down the Fulham Palace Road, let alone out to Ashford. And that means in terms of opportunities, sporting and other activities, boarding can offer you a wide range, and then they can come home at the weekend, be spoilt rotten. You don't need to engage with them on their prep or have any of those standard arguments during the week. You just spoil them at the weekends and then take them back to school on a Sunday, and they're in school for the whole week. We deal with all of that. But what's the main point about boarding? I believe, especially as the head of a girls' school, I believe that boarding and the boarding ethos and the look at the whole child absolutely creates confidence. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, when our children, our daughters in my case, go out to the world of work, the academic results will get them in. Of course they will. But it's the skills of independence, of creativity, of robustness, of grit and perseverance that will keep them working and succeeding. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't mind, I will just give you a brief run through as to who I am, very briefly, and then I have 5 main points that I would like to make, and I'll follow each one with a quote from a different type of boarder at my school, including an old boy of the school and also an ex-parent of the school. So I hope that'll give you a picture of what boarding is all about. But my name is Sid Inglis. I'm the headmaster of Elstree School, a boys' boarding and day school in rural West Berkshire. We have room for 100 boarders. We have 200 boys in the school, but we have room for 100 boarders. And we currently have a waiting list for the boarding house. We have full boarders, we have weekly boarders, we have boys who do 2 or 3 nights per week, and we also have day boys who are happy to be day boys, and we value them too. I've also, as you've heard, come from a school that was a full boarding school with the whole school boarding from the age of 8. I also have 3 children, 2 of whom are full boarders and one of whom is a flexi boarder who does 3 nights at Elstree. So I hope I've seen a number of different types of boarding to be able to answer some of your questions later. I'm just going to begin with the sense of what modern boarding is all about compared to perhaps the boarding that many, or perhaps our parents' generation, might have experienced. Modern boarding is much more family friendly. There are different options, as you've heard, full, weekly, flexi, and so on. There are boarding staff who are very, very sensitive to the needs of children. They fully understand the challenges that can face children who board, but importantly, they're often young, they're energetic, they're full of enthusiasm, and it becomes their vocation, it becomes their life, looking after the boarders within the boarding house. Teachers used to be figures of authority, slightly impersonal figures perhaps, and not necessarily people you might go to with a problem or a sensitive issue. Nowadays, children, luckily, do feel comfortable within many school environments that allows them to feel the support of the adult community. As you've heard, a huge wide range of activities that can be used at the weekends and in the evenings, and it's not really a case of packing them off and only seeing them again at Christmas. There's a little bit more to it than that. But my first quote is from a Year 6 boarder. He says, "It's a friendly, supportive environment to be in, and there are lots of adults around if you need someone to help. You get to know other boys in your year group who are in different classes, and you also get to interact with teachers out of the classroom," which I think is important. Second point is how boarding can benefit children. Inevitably, they're able to spend more time with their friends away from the classroom in a more informal setting. It really embeds that sense of strong friendship. It teaches children also to learn how to make their own decisions. Their week is quite structured. They have work, they have games, they have music, they have art, they have drama, and so on. But what boarding allows them to do is actually to make their own decisions, to decide what they're going to do, and to make them that little bit more independent. They have the opportunity to think for themselves. Shall I go and read a book in the library, or shall I kick a ball against the wall? Shall I hit a golf ball? Shall I draw a picture? Or shall I simply hang around with my friends, talking and enjoying their company? I think also employers are looking for a little bit of extra spark in their employees. They're looking for that sense of creativity. They're looking for that sense of self-responsibility. That spark, that extra bit. The academic side of things is almost taken as read for many employers. But actually that extra sense of creativity is something that they are really looking for. They learn to adapt to life in a community. They also develop a sense of emotional intelligence, the ability to know how to behave in certain situations, formal occasions, informal occasions, and they will arrive at their senior school or at university, or indeed in a job situation, much better prepared. It makes children resourceful. They learn to make good decisions, or they learn from some bad decisions, perhaps. They learn how to be discerning, when to be outspoken, when to be confident, when to be quiet, when to be kind and supportive. It teaches them to manage their time effectively and get that right balance between work and play. The next quote is from a Year 7 weekly boarder, and he says, "Boarding prepares you well for life at public school, and it gives you life skills like learning to get on with everyone, even when it's difficult. You get to learn how to live in a community and build up strong friendships. I get to walk from maths to music to drama to science to football to judo to choir and to chess. When I was at school in London, I spent most of my time in the car. Now I can do everything I want to, whilst also being able to see my family properly at the weekends." A grown-up comment from a Year 7 boy, but there we are. The perception, point 3, that boarding can damage the family unit, I'll challenge that. Families are busy, the world is busy, life is busy, parents work, and some families will say that they want their child to sleep in their own bed at night. That's what they want, that's what puts them off boarding, because they want their child to sleep in their own bed at night rather than in a dormitory. And for the family to spend lovely evenings at home, bonding over their supper. Very rarely does this happen. A child will get home from school, there's homework to do, he or she might get a Snapchat or an Instagram from a friend, they're desperate to keep in touch with their friends. There's a battle to get that homework done. They spend time in the car with a sibling, being driven to ballet or football practice. They then go to bed, and dad or mum get home from work late to give them a quick, "How was your day, darling?" before they're off again in the morning before it even gets light. At boarding school, everything is there on tap. Prep gets done at school. There's little or no social media. All the different activities are on site, and therefore time spent with family is quality time and not a quick, rushed hello. I recently had a boy start boarding much against the wishes of his parents, but what swung it for them was when the son said, "But Dad, I never get to see you anyway. You get back from work late, you're often away on business, and at school I get the chance to be with my friends and do all the things I love doing." So boarding can strengthen the family unit. Working parents can make time for their children at weekends and in the holidays, spending special quality family time together. The fourth point, just briefly, is that boarding at prep school is not necessarily a prerequisite for boarding at senior schools. Plenty of prep school day children thrive as boarders at senior school. It's important for me to say that. Of course it can be done. Importantly too, boarding isn't for everyone. It's not a problem that. Modern boarding allows children and families to choose when to board rather than being forced to do it. Often schools allow children to do taster boarding nights as well. And very often peer pressure kicks in from friends, and it's often children pleading with their parents if they can board rather than the other way around. Parents are much more welcome in schools perhaps than they were 20 or 30 years ago. Matches, concerts, plays and so on. So I see no evidence of children being damaged by boarding, far from it. Many parents are having to make these decisions about boarding based on a poor experience that they have had of boarding when they were at school. It's very different nowadays, and it's important to see beyond this. I quote now from an old boy of the school, and he says, "Boarding shaped my whole character. It taught me to be responsible for myself. It taught me to learn how to accept people's differences and to celebrate their successes. I had the opportunity to play sport, to be with my friends, and to enjoy making my own decisions. I learnt to cope with disappointment and to know how to adapt to different situations. I also made a core group of friends who have remained with me for life." Finally, some advice. Do your research, and where better to do it than the independent school show, of course. A housemaster or a housemistress is absolutely key to the happiness of your child at boarding school. If you want full boarding, check with the school as to how many full boarders there are in the school at weekends and in the evenings, and what provision there is for full boarders at the weekends. If you want your child to go to a boarding senior school, I would recommend, however, doing some boarding at prep school for all the reasons I've stated. If your child likes to be busy and fulfilled, stimulated and engaged in school life, boarding can give him or her that opportunity. If you and your child, however, simply don't think that boarding is right, there is no need to force it. Day schools also offer fantastic opportunities. Whatever is right for your family, that will be the right decision. And to conclude, I received a letter about 18 months ago from a parent who had moved their son from a state school to Elstree, which is inevitably a huge decision. And her comments could, I'm sure, have been made by many parents who send their children to boarding school. She was very reluctant for her son to board. And she wrote, "Dear Sid, one thing that really struck me again last week that I wanted to share with you was the attitude of the children at Elstree." I've changed the boy's name, by the way. When we received Bill's thank you letter regarding Christmas last week, obviously we knew the school were behind this. But the real feeling you get from the children is how grateful they are for the opportunities they are given at Elstree, and in particular the rewards that boarding can give. I expected when we moved Bill from state schooling into the private sector, we would meet arrogant, spoiled children who expected everything in life to be handed to them on a plate. I was genuinely worried that Bill would become like this. What I have seen in both Bill and his fellow pupils is quite the opposite. They are inspired by the staff to excel, they believe they ought to give things a try, and expect positive outcomes. They are not afraid to do new things and potentially fail. They're polite and grateful for what they've got. If anything, Bill has become more humble and certainly more aware of and grateful for the opportunities he has been given in his young life. I think the school should be very proud of this. And don't worry, I'll keep flying the boarding flag. It's a lovely letter to receive, but not all emails from parents are like that, I can promise you. But I've kept that one in my nice email folder from parents. But thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, and I think you've got a really good summary of what boarding is about in two very different schools. So here's the 30-second pitch for Ashford School. Ashford School happens to be an all-age school, so we have children from age 0, yes, 0, through to 18. They can't board until they're 6 months old, don't worry. But we have about 180 boarders aged from, that's a joke, don't worry, from about 10 upwards. The majority are aged 13, 14, 16. Ashford School is a day school with boarders, not a boarding school with day pupils. You might like to ask me about that. So the majority of our pupils are day pupils, and the minority are boarders. The majority of the boarders are full boarders and come from all over the world. And that adds a huge richness to the school, which I absolutely love. And I love working with teenagers. Let me just explain why I love working with teenagers. You might be quite surprised. But I love working with teenagers for this very simple reason. Teenagers are utterly driven by two completely opposing things. One is never to stand out, and the other is to be a complete individual. And if you've got teenagers or pre-teens, you will be experiencing that, I'm sure. And indeed, I've got 20-year-olds, and they're still in that mode. And that's why they're such fun to work with, because of that complex mix and the differences that that brings out in them, and the opportunities that it provides for schools, and in particular boarding schools, to have a really positive impact on those young people alongside you, their parents. That's what's key for me, and a good school is a good school irrespective of whether it's a boarding school or a day school. And there are two key elements, I think, to good schools. They focus on just two things. One is developing the person. So think of all the personal characteristics you'd like your own children to have, or you would like yourself to have. Compassion, integrity, confidence, resilience, empathy. All of those personal characteristics, which I have to say are far more valuable and long-lasting than whether you know how to resolve mechanical questions horizontally and vertically, which is what I was doing in a lesson yesterday. All of those things are vitally important for joy and confidence and fulfillment in life. And surely that's what we want as parents. We want them to be joyous in their life. Yes, successful. Yes, have a great career. But all of that is nothing if they don't enjoy living and get fulfillment from it. So the second thing that schools, I think, should be concentrating on and focusing on is maximizing the achievements of those young people. By that I don't mean the very narrow definition of academic attainment. That's important, yes, but GCSEs, A-levels, university degrees, they're all stepping stones to life. They're not ends in themselves. So achievement is much broader than that. It involves things like social action, leadership, music, sport, drama, indeed anything that the individual child wishes to pursue. So good schools are only focusing on those two things. I know that's the case in the schools represented here. How do they do it? It's very simple. It's like a Victoria sponge. The ingredients are simple, and putting it together is a bit more complex, but they do it by surrounding these young people with fantastic, energetic, inspiring, diverse role models. So in my school, we've got 400 employees. Fewer than 100 of those are teachers. But if you came along and asked any of them, what is your job? I'm pretty confident they would say to you, my job is to model the behaviour and attitudes we're expecting of the young children in the school. Whether they are 3 months old, and I mean that, whether they're 3 months old or 18. And that's what good schools are doing. So I'm going to finish by answering the question that was posed to me, and that is, when is boarding right for your child? When is boarding right for your child? Do you want a black and white answer, or do you want a nuanced answer? Black and white. All the time and never. Okay? So here's the nuanced answer. It depends on your child. Well, no, that's surprising, isn't it? So it depends on when your child is ready. So all the things that have been spoken about already, is it logistically, is it practically suitable for you as a family? So if you're jet-setting around the world and neither of you as parents are there most of the week, then the answer's pretty obvious. You've got to find some mechanism of replacing your influence as a parent when you are not there, and boarding might be a good way of doing that. But it may not be. It may be you can do it in other ways. I think the other thing is when they are emotionally ready, and I guess when you are emotionally ready. So actually you've got to be driven by your child, not by you. Okay? And by readiness and neediness, I think, is the other thing. So if they've got a particular interest in pursuing, I don't know, biathlon or art or something like that, where actually the practicalities of you doing it during the week just don't make sense, then here's a great opportunity. So they can spend hours and hours and hours practicing music or drama or sport or whatever it might be in their boarding school context. And that's to their benefit. I guess it's also when it offers an opportunity for stability in your family life, particularly in times of turmoil. So that might be when, as happened to me, when a grandparent or a parent dies. Stability, security are really, really important, and boarding can provide that. Proximity is really important. These days in the UK, most boarders live within an hour of their boarding school. Clearly that's not the case for international boarders. And let me talk about international boarders. Most of the boarders at my school are international students, and I take the responsibility of looking after them really, really seriously. I have in my mind's eye a father who handed over to me his son, a 13-year-old, 18 months ago, and as he handed over his son, he had tears in his eyes. That really struck a chord with me. He was handing over being a father to me and to all the people in that school. And I guess that's one thing I would suggest you look at really carefully. What are the people that are surrounding your children like? What are they going to provide, in, not just in terms of how will they teach and how much they will push, but what care will they provide? You can't judge that by looking at a prospectus. You have to go and visit and talk, and you have to give your child the opportunity to do the same. And I just end by saying there are a couple of times when you should not consider boarding. So one, you should never threaten boarding as a punishment for a child. So you're being bloody difficult at home, so we're going to send you off to a boarding school. It is just the road to disaster. Do not ever do it. And you should never insist on a child boarding because you want it and they don't. You may need to cajole and persuade and demonstrate, but if it's your wish and not theirs, then I would suggest again that it's not likely to be successful.